G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Just starting first dog on the moon.
Thank you, Ponsonby. I think I'll have another Mai Tai. Oh, no, a pina colada. Although it would be nice to taste the rum this time. And make it a jug. Don't forget the little umbrella. I don't want to have you flogged again. You cannot get good help these days. Oh, there you are. Hello. Welcome, Patriots. Welcome to First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living. Cheers. I'm Walkley Award-winning cartoonist for The Guardian Australia, First Dog on the Moon, broadcasting live here from my tropical island hideaway on the Moon Island. We are 100 or something kilometres off the coast of Queensland or somewhere, I don't know. It takes ages to get here in the jet. We're a long way away from anywhere, very remote, and this week we're talking about lifestyle choices. That's right. Some people get to choose their lifestyle and some people don't. Obviously, at the ABC, it's all vegan Pilates and finger-knitted sandal workshops, but apparently out there in the real world, and as elitist Radio National listeners, you've no doubt been spared, but out there where decent, hard-working folks face the bitter reality of everyday life with only the soothing murmur of News Corp columnists to keep them warm at night, out there, things are tough. Oh, unless, of course, you live on a fancy remote Aboriginal community. Oh, imagine the luxury of living on the land you've had a continuous relationship with for over 2,000 generations, 40,000 years or 60,000 years. I don't know. Anyway, who is counting? Imagine having the gall like these people do to expect Australian taxpayers to maintain their alleged cultural identity, but also to live right out in the middle of, well, look, to be honest, I have no idea where it is, but it's in the lap of luxury. These communities have all the mod cods, running water and even electricity. It was different in my day. Of course, and just to clarify, we're not talking about all the small remote communities. There are plenty of those that are full of white people. No one has a problem with pouring tax dollars into them. They'll be fine. And didn't we say sorry about massacring thousands of Aboriginal people over the last 200 years? Seriously, what more do you need? It's about time you got over it and moved on. Why can't you be more like white Australia, who've forgiven and forgotten? Of course, it's not just the black fellows. There are lots of lifestyle choices I don't think the government should be paying for. Things like all these lesbian-run women's refuges filled with ladies who should probably be at home with their husbands. Not ones who are being murdered, but all the others. Or tropical getaways like Manus and Nauru. I mean, if these people didn't want to be tortured, why did they flee death and persecution in the first place? And being unemployed. Why should I pay for that? Pull up your socks and just go out and get a job. I did. I'm a professional national treasure. I own my own island. The big picture is that Australia's rightly spending your precious taxes on preparing for 2050. Money for things like private schools that politicians send their kids to. Did you know there are some schools in inner cities, Sydney and Melbourne, that don't have a third pool? They only have a second oval. How can Foppington and Jacinta be expected to learn a single thing if they have to use laptops that were made before June last year? The whole thing is barbaric. What would the United Nations say? Actually, don't get me started on the United Nations. I'm sick and tired of being lectured. Gerald, mix me another horny paramedic and don't spare the creme de menthe. We should be putting our funds towards nation building, critical infrastructure like chaplains for schools. And yes, actual counsellors specifically trained to help suicidal children would be nice, but you can't have everything. And anyway, I've always found Jesus to be very handy in a tight spot, and I don't mean like Mr. Graspington, the PE teacher at St. Don't Recalls. I'm sorry, Patriots, I don't have time for other people's problems. I have plenty of my own. Gordon, the kiwi fruit in this Midori bum thruster hasn't been killed properly. Please beat yourself to death with this picket. Anyway, thanks for listening, Patriots. This has been First Dog on the Moon's Guide to Modern Living, proudly brought to you by the First Dog on the Moon Institute. You're welcome. And that's it for us on Sunday.
Well, there you go. As they said, the big news this week was Tony Abbott deciding that he wanted to back Western Australian government moves to close down remote Aboriginal communities in Western Australia. There's a couple of issues they haven't quite mentioned. One of the critical factors in getting a land claim through the courts is that people have to prove they have an ongoing, continuous relationship with the land. So if you're a fat cat, trendy, money-grubbing asshole like, say, Gina Rinehart, and maybe you kind of more or less own the Liberal government of Western Australia, and you would like to go prospecting or exploring or mining somewhere on Aboriginal land, you have to dislodge the Aboriginal people from the land so that you can then demonstrate in court that they do not have a continuous ongoing presence on the land to maintain their relationship. Therefore, they don't qualify to have it as a land claim. And that's not been mentioned by any of the Aboriginal commentators. It hasn't been mentioned by any of the left-wing commentators. It hasn't been mentioned by any of the right-wing commentators. Tony Abbott hasn't mentioned it. But that's the subplot. If you can get the blackfellas off the land, then they can't make a land claim on it. You won't have to negotiate with them when you want to turn the place upside down for an open cut mine or whatever hidden agenda is operating here. The idea that taxpayers in the cities are supporting the Aborigines for no reason is completely spurious, particularly if we consider that the very first West Australian Constitution, the one that was approved by the mother of all parliaments in England, had a clause which stated that the West Australian government had to set aside £100,000, which back in the 1880s was a bloody lot of money, £100,000 or 1% of total state economic activity to be given to the Aboriginal traditional owners of the land. Well, Western Australia said, yes, fine, thank you, England, we will have our statehood, we'll become an independent colony. And the very first act of the West Australian Parliament after it was constituted as an independent colony by Mother England was to repeal its constitution and then vote in a second constitution which didn't have any reference to putting money aside for the Aborigines to the tune of 1% of state revenue, state income, state economic activity. So West Australia sort of leads the nation in disenfranchising the Aborigines in defiance of what Mother England had to say, although, Governor Arthur Phillip was told to make friends with the Aborigines, not to let loose the sheep and potato brigade bent on massacre. But there we come to a point. 250 years ago, when it took a free-range human being 2 hours per person per day to furnish themselves with food, shelter and clothing, and they had the other 22 hours a day to rest and philosophise and interact in networking ways within members of their family and clan and other tribes, to practice their culture, in other words. And in those days, everything you made, you owned, and everything that you hunted or gathered, you gave away 9/10 of. And that way, no matter how bad somebody's day was, nobody ever went to bed hungry at night because somebody else had had a good day and they were giving away 9/10 of everything that they'd hunted or gathered. So the environment was brilliantly well cared for, and we didn't have huge out-of-control firestorms because there were lots of carefully timed hazard reduction burns which actually shaped the landscape. So along come these people who looked at auto-rotating rotary wing sailplanes that are gyroscopically guided and steered by secondary and tertiary aerodynamic gyroscopic interplays, and they looked at the boomerangs and they said, oh, that's really simple and primitive and childish, or what an interesting toy. And they thought that wooden boats being eaten by marine worms with square canvas sails was really high technology. And they came out here to Australia and looked at the land and said, how many sheep can we run on that? And they've proceeded to crash the environment, trash the ecology, bugger the biosphere, put the topsoil at the bottom of the rivers and clog the rivers, and then put any that's left into the ocean or let it blow away and decorate the New Zealand snow-covered mountaintops. But the whole deal was that the Aborigines didn't know how to man-age the land. They didn't know how to realise its productiveness. Make more eggs come out of the cloaca. That's what being more productive. A duct is a tube made out of meat. If you want more things to come out of the duct, you get more eggs off the land, I guess, you know, kill all the turkeys. Get rid of all the little game animals that used to micromanage the stored solar energy that the vegetation had put on the ground. So anyway, into this functional biosphere came the people who were going to show everybody how to make it work better. And they said to the traditional owners, have a go at living alongside us, but when we take all of the goodness off the land and you guys start to starve, and when you start spearing our sheep, that's when we're going to shoot you and poison the waterholes. And then if disease hasn't killed you off, maybe drunkenness will, but those who survive can be pushed into shanty towns on the outskirts of cities and towns. Or if they want to, they can work for maybe a third of what a white man has to be paid to work for the farmers and the agriculturalists and the people who are trashing the traditional land. And for a long time, it meant that people could pretty much sort of live on their traditional land if they were prepared to camp down by the creek half a mile away from the farmhouse and ride horses mustering cattle or fixing fences, working for the cocky. Come 1967 and the referendum, Aborigines had to be paid the same as whitefellas, so all those people got unemployed, told to leave the station. And they drifted into the towns and the cities, and they were also paid unemployment benefits and allowed to drink alcohol for the first time. So as an experiment, it went kind of chaotically wrong, and really the Aboriginal culture is about one generation further down the social decay path compared to the white civilization culture in Australia. But then somebody said, look, you know, what we need to do is set up these traditional homelands and support people to live on their traditional homelands. And the whole bargain, the contract between white Australia and Aboriginal Australia is that white Australia was going to show Aboriginal Australia how to make the land more productive. And because of that, they were going to lose their way of life. You can't live like a free-range Aborigine in Australia anymore because you'll starve to death because the biosphere isn't there anymore. But white Australia pays the Aborigines to peacefully sit there and teach their kids to keep their culture together. And basically, Aboriginal Australia is waiting for white Australia to disappear up its own arsehole in a puff of economic implosion. So it's really, really bad-mannered of the Liberal Party right-wing fascists to say that it's a lifestyle choice to live there. No, you know, the white civilization put them there and made the country fall to pieces, so you can't sustainably live there like an Aborigine anymore. So, yeah, I think we should actually be paying them to live there. Otherwise, there'll be no human presence on the land except Gina Reinhardt in a bulldozer. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.